Time for a Soccer Down Here 1v1, and this was a story that, frankly, I could not avoid. Having seen that the Marshall Islands, by their own admission, are the last country on earth without a national football team until now. And the man who is their first technical director, talk about a Christmas present, for the Marshall Islands Soccer Federation, created back in 2020, Coach Lloyd Owers. Coach, thanks for hanging out with us for a very informative and very cool topic for a 1v1.
No, thank you for having me on. It's an amazing opportunity.
So let's kind of go back to the genesis of all of this. It is an island chain about 3,000 miles off the northeast coast of Australia. And unless you have one of those Star Trek things that you can go, it's not something you can just sit there and click a snap of your fingers and get to. You started a blog, and this ended up with a job offer. Go through this. How did this happen?
Yeah, so it's a very random one. I mean, I'll go back to the start where you said about pinpointing where the place is. It's definitely not somewhere that you would notice, and it's definitely not somewhere that you would instantly recognize where to go to. And for example, if you look on Google Maps, the Pacific Island, there's obviously where Pacific Ocean where this is. The little red tag for Google is bigger than the main islands themselves. So it says a lot. But yeah, it came about via my blog site. So I realized, the long story of it is that I realized I was going to miss writing when I finished a master's degree in coaching. So I went in to study later in life, coached for quite a few years now, but studied at a later point in my life and realized that, yeah, I quite enjoyed that writing aspect of it. So I had a bit of a void there and started this coaching blog where weekly content, session plans, articles, and the main one was coach Q&As with people from around the world. And that's what started this process, because I was put in touch with a guy from the Samoan national team, and we did a coach Q&A, got talking. It spiraled, and it still is actually the most viewed article on there. But the good thing about it was, because it was such a unique story that they were telling, it then spiraled my own network. So I had connections on LinkedIn and Twitter from people in the Pacific. And one guy that I got talking to was a guy called Shem Levi, who is the Marshall Islands Soccer Federation president. So it was very informal. Yeah, the Marshall Islands are 12 hours ahead of myself in the UK. So being able to pinpoint a time to talk properly was very difficult. So it came about from WhatsApp messages and voice notes, emails, just different points of the day because of the time difference. So very informal. And then it just started spiraling. So I was asked to present my own philosophy, my own style, and then how I could link it to their almost culture, but their aims. And then the next thing was offered this role as a technical director.
When you look at all of this, I mean, have you thought of yourself, we have different personalities that we view ourselves in. Have you thought of yourself as a builder in your career as a player and as a coach, or was this just something that happened organically? It's like, oh, I'm now in this builder element of my life.
No, for me, it's been a bit of a process where I stopped playing at around 24, 25, but I've always coached. I've coached since I was about 16. And the part of that was just always maybe not knowing where I was going to end up and how to get there, but I'd like it where I'd like it to be. And, I've had roles in coach development, player development, managing analysis in the game. So very varied roles. But for me, it was part of the long-term aim of something bigger, being a technical director of a program somewhere. And luckily that's now happened.
When you look at this, how many times a day, or how many times, like I said, this is probably the best Christmas present that you could have ever gotten. How many times a day do you sit there and go, man, I got to pinch myself for everything and how cool this is? And then how many times a day do you sit there and go, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, probably about 100 times on each. I mean, the biggest thing for it is, I think you get a lot of people saying why, a lot of people saying where, a lot of people saying how, because it's a predominantly remote role at the moment. So there's a lot of times where you have to pinch yourself in terms of the reality of it, and it's such a unique story for those guys that to be part of that process is just massive in itself. But the opportunity it presents for myself to grow my own profile, but also to help a nation become part of their history as well is massive.
And you're having to do this basically from scratch. I mean, this is like trying to find the recipe book and trying to figure out, okay, who are some of the best chefs in the world that have done this from scratch, and trying to come up with this menu for success when it comes to the Marshall Islands. And I mean, it's from the ground up because of the youth aspect of it, because you want that future, from the top down because you want to have that presence in Oceania and eventually FIFA and all that. And so basically you have these two colliding ideas that you have to manage at the same time. And that's a really difficult thing that you've got to juggle and have to think about things in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, I mean, you've literally said it the way I would describe it as well. So I would say that we work from the bottom up and the top down and meet in the middle. The bottom up being the school aspects and the youth curriculums and the youth programs that will roll out. So the first instance of it is the Marshall Islands are very US cultured, very US influenced. A lot of baseball, a lot of basketball. They're the sports they watch, they're the sports they play. You don't need a lot of space, you don't need a lot of players to be able to do that. But because the game is growing so rapidly in the US, it's now naturally growing in the Marshall Islands. So you've got children that are the ones driving this program. The children are the ones that are saying to parents, they're saying to their teachers that they want to play, and they are playing, but it's just very informal. There's no real structure to it across anywhere. So the main focus and the first focus is to put the emphasis onto the schools. So I've created a school curriculum, which is being rolled out across the schools across the country. PE teachers will be the ones that are delivering this. And so that's a massive one for us. And that's going to be rolled out a lot sooner than we hoped and imagined, which is fantastic. And then we start to look at the youth structure. So you've got the talent identification, you've got talent development stages, and it will be open access to allow opportunities for everyone to play. But if we do realize that, we've got players that are excelling, there'll be specific pathways of, excellence pathways for those players as well. So they'll be the ones that we start to push and put into different talent programs that long term will start to link into the national teams. But then at the same time, you work top down. So we want some form of identity in terms of a national team, because like you said, it's a great thing, but also a bad thing at the same time, where you have the only nation on earth without a team. So that's going to change. And the good thing about it is a national stadium that's due to be completed very, very soon. And that's going to be the hub for the youth activities. It will be the main hub for league structures, but also obviously the national teams as well. So the recruiting pool is going to have to be ideally very local initially, and looking at those local players and opening it out to local communities. But because of the nature of, especially in the States, for example, where Marshallese citizens are quite heavily populated in certain areas, you never know what could happen in terms of players that are eligible to represent the country that are based elsewhere as well.
And the interesting aspect of that is that it's Arkansas and the Marshallese. That was something that completely and totally came out of. I mean, that came out of the cop. I mean, literally, that's like all the way over here. That's like did not have that one on the bingo card.
A random one
of Arkansas and Marshallese. That was something when it's almost like doing genealogy at the same time that you're trying to build something.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, massively. I mean, I came about this just by chance, and then the same guy that did the initial Samoan interview also then came to me with the same information. Oh, I found this. So yeah, great. We were talking about it, and it's so random. And the biggest population was in a place, and this is going to be a shout out if there's anyone from Springdale, Arkansas. That is the biggest sort of catchment for Marshallese citizens for some reason, and I can't quite pinpoint why. But yeah, Arkansas. If you consider that in the Marshall Islands itself, it's a population of around 62,000, but there's around 30,000 in Arkansas. And that's massive. That's incredible. So there's also a good population in Hawaii, which is understandable because it's also one of the easiest routes into the Marshall Islands. So, and then obviously dotted around elsewhere around North America, there are Marshallese citizens.
And it's just to be able to build this. How many hats do you think you're wearing right now? Because it's genealogist, and if we can add, let me know. Genealogist,
Yep.
archaeologist, basically a football archaeologist. You're like the foreman on the construction crew. You're the technical director for the nation. What other jobs am I missing here? Who else are you on this business card, knowing that you're having to use both sides?
Well, fortunately, I'm not the foreman on the construction side because I'd be definitely very, very useless with that. But the other aspects are very true. So, I mean, if we're looking at like the football aspect, the technical director aspect, it's very varied in terms of just that role itself. So I'm responsible for rolling out the school curriculum, the youth structure, the national team identity, a culture for how we play as a nation, and the principles behind it, and then connecting it to the nation's culture. But at the same time, it's playing a part in supporting with league structures and how they're developed. It's also been part of looking at, not right now, but it will be looking at player eligibility and where they're located and how they can fit into that model. So, yeah, in terms of that one role, it wears a few hats itself. But yeah, it's exciting. The fortunate thing for me, I do have help in the form of like social media. So we have a couple of guys that look after social media and sponsorship and fundraising, which is massive for us at the moment because, like you said, without OFC and any FIFA membership, we are very heavily reliant on that funding and sponsorship. So yeah, fortunately, they do have a little bit of support with that.
And there is a GoFundMe that is currently out there that
There
folks
is,
are contributing toward as well. When it comes to what's it like to have an entire country and the athletic aspect of it, basically, it sounds like they have bought in from everything that you have put in there. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a Marcelo Bielsa PowerPoint presentation, but it sounds like they have bought into everything that you have proposed to them so far. What's it like to have a nation and a sporting federation buy into what you want to have happen?
I've got to be honest. Like, I think the interest from Shem, the president, has just been fantastic, and the way that he's, I guess, trusting is fantastic because it shows the sort of kind of person that he is, where they want help and they're very open to help and ideas. And I'm fully aware that everything I do submit will be amended in some way, and I'll submit something to the board, and it might have to come back to be tweaked and then changed and then adapted and sent back out, and then it's where it might be finalized. But yeah, I think the nation, like you said, they're a very proud people, and they represent internationally at the Olympics, for example. Now it's just a case of showcasing different themselves in a different sport and representing in a different way. And I think I thought about this earlier today. And if you look back at I don't know, like Cool Runnings, the film with Jamaican bobsled team, it's that same feel. It's, I don't know, it's for them, we're not setting out to be world beaters. We're setting out to provide opportunities for the Marshallese citizens to represent their country and wear the nation's flag.
And as we've always maintained here at the network, rising tide lifts all boats. And to have that kind of influence in a place that has not had the only place in the world that doesn't have a national football team until Christmas of this past year in 2020, when you create the Fed, all it does is continue to grow the game, and you don't know who you touch because of what you're doing there with the Marshall Islands. Do you feel any pressure attached to this? Because, and as a coach and as a player, you know that there are different kinds of pressure. There's good pressure, there's bad pressure, and then there's just pressure. Do you feel any of those three?
Not at this stage. I genuinely, purely because I think a good pressure, because it's a massive opportunity for myself to showcase what I believe I think is right and how I would approach the game, and to then showcase that on a local, a regional, and then also a worldwide stage it's a fantastic opportunity. But in terms of, I'd say like a nervous energy or a bad energy to it, not right now, or pressure, because everyone's so supportive. Everyone wants to be a part of it at the moment. And I'm sure that will change at some point. But right now, it's all quite good pressure because everyone's wishing us in the right direction. Everyone is pushing us to be successful. Everyone wants us to be a success.
Lloyd Owers, the first ever technical director for the Marshall Islands Soccer Federation, here for a Soccer Down Here 1v1. And I know that we all have lists that we operate from. And it can be in any number of places. I mean, for me, it could be legal pad. You operate off of like 9 of these. You pull your phone out. Some phones have styluses. You sit there and you can pull the stylus out. You write on the phone an idea. You jam the stylus back in. You put the phone away. You could have that. You could have that board that's attached to your fridge, like 2:00 in the morning. After you've taken care of your young children, you sit there and you're getting the water before you go back to bed. Oh, I've got an idea. You write it down on the fridge. You go back to bed. Or in the room that I'm viewing you in, off somewhere in camera range, there could be one of those big 6x8 dry erase boards that's got multiple colors and looks like a math problem from, trigonometry or something. Where do you house your lists with everyone that you're in contact with to grow this process? And what do you think the next thing that you can cross off of your list is?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think previously it's been something where I don't know, I work in my head, and then the problem is because my brain works at 100 miles an hour, I have an idea, and then I'll forget something, and I'll come back to something else. So fortunately, my wife is very organised, and she went out and she's provided me straight away with a notepad, a diary, and a pen that has an eraser on the end. So I can't. I have no escapes now, no excuses. So at the moment, it literally is just filling out a page all the time, filling a page, fill a page, fill a page. But at the same time, myself and the 2 guys that do the sponsorship funding, the social media, we have like WhatsApp groups, and we just share ideas all the time. And we might be talking from 7 in the morning till 9 at night every day. And it's a case of it might be an idea that's really, really good. And then the other 2 will disagree, or it might be something that all 3 of us agree on straight away, and then we'll do it. So, we've got things going on at the moment where we've had kit manufacturers and suppliers wanting to be a part of it. And that's been overwhelming because we've had so much more interest than we thought we would have. So it's a case of not really tying down to one thing. It's a case of trying to work out what the best fit is for the culture and the nation. But then we've also had people that have, contacted me directly because they want to be the national team head coach and stuff like this. It's crazy. But in terms of the next thing to tick off, the school curriculum has been submitted. It's the next one now to tick off is joining the dots between like the national identity and the youth structures. So literally today I've sent it over to the board, like a national identity where it embodies similar to what I did initially for Shem, my style, how I think we should approach it from youth to senior teams, from boys, girls, male, female, senior adults as well, whatever it may be, but also embodies like the cultural feel of community-based pride and being together. So then connecting that to the youth structures, and that's the next thing to tick off.
Because Polynesians are incredibly prideful and are truly invested in their culture. They are immersed in it, and it is in every aspect of their lives. It is meals, it's behavior, it's dress, it's presentation, it is ceremony, all of these things that have to be considered when you're building something like this. Even yes, there is the U.S. influence with the military past and all those those kinds of things. How much of an education has it been for you to understand about the identity and the culture that's attached to the Marshall Islands and everything that they stand for?
I think I've learned more in the last 2 weeks about the region and that whole part of the world than I did any other time previously, because you have the opportunity to speak to people, and local people are real people. You know, they can tell a real story. And just speaking to Shem is fantastic because you get an idea of their aims, their dreams, what they want to do, what they're currently doing, and it gives you a real oversight of that. And like I said, you know, you get an idea of and a good feeling that they are very community based. We stick together. That's the principle. You know, people stick together. They work together. They can overcome problems together. So if we can combat that and into like and embed that into a style of the game as well, that would be fantastic. But yeah, when you talk about, you know, the previous histories and stuff like that, that's what started this process because, like I said, it's very US cultured, and to raise an awareness of the Marshall Islands soccer to US based citizens would be fantastic because that's where the culture's come from. You know, the game's growing in the States, it's growing in the Marshall Islands. Kids want to play it, they see it on TV, they're now playing it a little bit more. And I think just to raise an awareness worldwide is fantastic for everyone, not just myself.
When it comes to, you mentioned how much you've learned over the last handful of weeks. What are some of the other markers here in the calendar early in 2023? I know that we're heading toward July because of the stadium completion and the games in Micronesia, I believe.
Yeah.
What are some of the next markers that you have on your list that folks need to be keeping an eye on when it comes to the continuing build of the Soccer Federation?
I would say that initially I created a timeline of what I wanted to do and how I would present it to Shem and the board, and you know, this is what we would work towards. But I think because we are starting so low down in terms of from scratch, we couldn't really place deadlines and timeframes onto anything. So it's now just naturally like it's organically happening. It's we've done this, that leads to this. And because we've done this, it leads to that. So it's a case of just it's naturally happening, naturally producing onto the next step. And I think that's probably a better way at the moment because if we work too much on a time frame, we might end up forgetting bits that are really important because we have to create everything from scratch. And if we rush it, it's probably going to not be. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be the finalized product, and it needs to be. So, for example, for us to become any form of OFC members in Oceania, we need a structure. You know, we need things to be able to go to them and say, "This is what we've got. This is who we are. This is why we're doing it. Can you come and help us?" Because I think if we go to them and we are just, well, we have a document and that's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing really it's so hard for everybody then to work on a plan. So if we can say, well, this is what we've got for youth, this is what we've got for an aim, this is what we do for national teams, and when we start to, or how and when we want to start to use those. This is our league structure. We have informal teams, but we're formalizing it into an actual league structure now. Can you just come and provide support? And hopefully that then allows, you know, obviously there's a lot of protocol, a lot of policies, procedures to follow, but hopefully that can get the ball rolling a little bit more than if we didn't have anything in place. So because of that, yeah, it's difficult to have time frames just because we want to make sure everything's right first.
So then for those that want to continue to keep an eye on things, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you that the next markers that continue to pop up, you know, we're going to be knocking on your door. We're going to be wanting to find out the latest and how things are continuing to grow. For folks that want to follow along in the process right now, where do they need to go on social media, things like that? Where are some of those places that folks can keep track of what's going on?
Yeah, so Twitter's the main one for us at the moment. That's been the biggest growth. So in 2 weeks tomorrow, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow since we went live. And I think we're up to about 1,500 followers, but obviously we've had media sources from around the world trying to contact. So that's fantastic. So that's our biggest one. So on Twitter, it is at SoccerFedMI. Instagram is Lowa, which is LOWA_soccer. And the reason for that is because Loa is in like Polynesian mythology. It's like the god who created different things. So created the sea, created the land. So in our thinking, it was when he created soccer. So we brought it to the land. So Loa_soccer. And then LinkedIn and Facebook is just Marshall Islands Soccer Federation. And then,
Coach,
like you said, there's the GoFundMe page as well, which I will plug.
go for it. Yeah. I mean, it's there as well for folks and GoFundMe. And what's the easiest way to search for the GoFundMe?
Any of our social media streams, and same again, predominantly on Twitter, where it's in the actual bio itself, the link to it.
Well, Coach, this has been fascinating on multiple fronts. It's very, very cool to see the genesis of something and wanting to continue to grow the game in places where it needed to be grown, and to be able to catch up with you and dealing with a 5-hour time difference as you and I are discussing things currently. Yeah, we will be definitely keeping track of everything. And I will go ahead and tell you right now, you've got golden ticket status at SDH. If anything happens, knock on our door, and we will definitely pick up the phone and pick up all of these different ways of communicating, and we'll keep track of everything. Don't ever be afraid to knock on our door and let us know how you're growing the game with the Marshall Islands there. Thanks for hanging out with us for a Soccer Down Here 1v1. We will definitely be catching up soon.
Thank you.